Hello and welcome to the DisruptAbility Podcast. Today we're talking to Martyn Sibley, who is the co-founder and CEO of Disability Horizons. He's going to tell us all about digital community empowerment. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to the DisruptAbility Podcast. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Martyn Sibley. Martyn is a disability influencer. He's an entrepreneur. He has Disability Horizons and Worldchangers. And I am really looking forward to this conversation today. Hi, Martyn. How are you?
Hi there, Claire. Thanks for having me on the show today. I'm really excited to have a good old chinwag with you.
Yes, that's exactly it. Martyn, can you tell our listeners, what do you do and what are you doing at the moment?
Sure. Well, I often say that, having my disability, so I'm a wheelchair user, it's a genetic condition. So since birth has been something that has definitely shaped my career and to a degree life. The personal experiences and the barriers I've faced are a big sort of fuel for what I've gone on to do. But equally, it's that important point that it's a part of my identity, but it's not all of it. And that's been quite an interesting one to navigate as I've gone headfirst into working for disability rights and inclusion, to have that work-life balance. And we might come on to that later. But in terms of job-wise, I studied economics and then a master's in marketing. I then went on and worked at the disability charity Scope for about 5 years in my sort of early to late 20s. And then about 10 years ago, I started blogging, and it was very much on the side of the job at Scope, and it was never intended to become some sort of business pursuit that it turned out to be. But I think around that time when blogging and social media was starting to come about and get a bit more adoption, it resonated. I think disabled people and families and friends of disabled people and professionals too, I think to have an insight into the world of someone with a disability that happened to be me was of interest. And that's where it all really begun, to the sort of the influencing that you mentioned, and all of that stuff really spawned from my blog. So from that, I've done a lot of media work. I present for the BBC, and I've written for The Guardian and The Independent, and been on the radio. I've travelled a lot, so I've ended up doing a lot of blogging and journalism about accessible tourism, working really all around the world on that. And then through leaving my sort of secure, safe day job in London and giving it a go entrepreneurially about 8 years ago now, it's been let's say an interesting journey on how to fund, to pay the mortgage and get food on the table, but also to employ other people within the business and grow different things. And through that entrepreneurial journey, a friend of mine, Shrin, and I founded Disability Horizons, which is a online magazine and community. We co-founded Accomable, which was, we said it was like the Airbnb for disabled people. And we got grant money and angel investors, and we exited and sold to Airbnb, of all people, 2 years ago. And now I'd say I'm much more into the kind of consultancy and coaching space. With Worldchangers is very much about empowering other world changers. And with Disability Horizons, we're also looking at how we help businesses run marketing campaigns with and for disabled people. So quite a few different aspects of it, but I would say the umbrella, or the linchpin, if you like, that holds all my work together is purely a vision of an inclusive world. And that's what gets me up every day and drives me forward, and it gives me the energy to do all these things, as I really believe that everyone benefits when the world is accessible to everybody.
What an interesting journey. I mean, I'm exhausted. You've done all that in such a short time. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I know you really believe in like digital community empowerment. Can you tell me why you believe in this so much?
Yeah, well, on that personal level, when I started blogging, it was a time, I guess, prior to blogging, to have a voice, you needed the gatekeepers, so to speak, of the mainstream media. And obviously, local media, they're always looking for interesting and relevant community stories, but it's still a gatekeeper that decides if you and your story is suitable or not for their publication or whatever it is they're running. And I think with the rise of blogs and social media, anyone can do it. There's no, as long as you've got a laptop or a smartphone, and I suppose importantly, the education of how to use it and some of the things around confidence. But in terms of real barriers, there aren't really any. Anyone can start a blog. And it was very liberating to be able to share my experience of life and the things I felt about government policy that wasn't empowering to disabled people, or the ways that businesses don't really understand that disabled people are consumers. And so on a personal level, it was a very empowering way of getting my views out. And then really with Disability Horizons, it was to give a platform to other disabled people where they didn't maybe have to commit to being a blogger and publishing every day or every week, but that they could submit stories if and when they wanted to. And so we publish at least 2 articles a week, and we started in 2011. So I'll do the math sometime, but it's a hell of a lot of articles that we published. And from that, we've built up a big community. We have around 60,000 readers each month. We've got a very engaged email list and a really engaged social media following. And particularly more recently, where platforms like Facebook have the groups function, we found that the private groups are really amazing for a safe space for disabled people to ask questions and kind of crowdsource solutions from which tube station is accessible when they're going traveling, to how to get funding for care, whatever it might be. And so really having a platform and having a digital community just creates that feeling of belonging of a very specific topic area like disability, but it's relevant to any interest or community really. And I think there's just so many benefits that can come from that. And I think in a way, as a society, we're still exploring what the benefits of digital communities are, but also, as we were touching on, we were chatting before, there are, of course, risks and difficulties around technology and stuff. So I think, we're not naive to that side of it, but I think for me, it's been a very positive experience of digital empowerment.
Do you think that these digital communities help combat isolation, which can be a huge issue for people with disabilities?
They do, in terms of, 20, 30 years ago, for me to find someone, even the specific impairment I've got called spinal muscular atrophy, to have found someone else with SMA would have been pretty difficult, because it was quite a rare condition. Whereas now I'm involved in a Facebook group that is full of people with this impairment just from the UK, and there's other groups across Europe and across the world. So I think that there's definitely that feeling of belonging and not being isolated. What I also think is important is that we don't just rely on the digital stuff. That when you look at the difficulties around disability, there should be the kind of getting together offline, and there should be the empowerment into employment and into restaurants and shopping centres and all that stuff. So I think it's good to make that clear that it's not instead of the offline world, but it's been quite a powerful way to even start lobbying and campaigning for more access in the offline world through these digital groups as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And information is power. So people being able to get the information from a trusted source like Disability Horizons is brilliant. Is it just in the UK, or can people join? Do you have people from all over the world on
Yeah,
Disability
I mean
Horizons?
it's a website, it's digital, so there's no borders or barriers. It's disabilityhorizons.com. I know that from our Google Analytics, we are more 75% UK readers, and that makes sense because Shrin and I are from the UK, and we the early people that got involved writing were our friends and friends of friends. So there's an element that it's grown out of the UK, but we've got sort of 15 to 20% in America and sort of 5 to 10% rest of the world. We also did run it in Poland, Portugal, Spain, and Italy. And the main idea was to translate the original articles. But the difficulty is there is a cultural context. I think, there's an element of wanting to read stories by someone you really relate to. And that includes that they're from those countries, not just translating the language. And then there wasn't the resources to support people to set up that scale of thing that we've done. So that didn't quite work at the time, but we've still got an eye on that once we've grown more and we get more funding, then we very much want to give that model to other countries. And in fact, the one place we still are running is in the Arabic region. So our volunteer is based in London, but she's originally from Iraq and she has a disability. And that's actually been very successful and has been picked up in a lot of media, because you can imagine that some of the Arabic countries, the level of provision for disability is minuscule. And so it's been very, kind of disruptive having this sort of platform and giving people a voice in those countries as well.
That's really interesting. And Martyn, you live in a country like in the UK where it is very diverse. So people with disabilities are from a very diverse cultural background. Have you noticed that there is a very different cultural attitude to disability
Do you mean in other countries when I've
from other
travelled?
countries, or people
Yeah,
even living in the UK, but their cultural background is different? Do they have a different attitude?
yeah. I mean, I think it's very difficult to always generalize, but I think some trends or themes, if you like, are definitely around the kind of economic ability of a country. So from a tourism perspective, countries with a better economic, power and GDP, they've obviously been able to make changes around transport and buildings and even education. And so that enables disabled people to get out and about and be more included and live inverted comma, normal life. And that means that then Joe Public is more used to being around disabled people. Whereas I think when you go to countries where there just isn't drop curbs and there are no accessible buses and taxis, let alone getting in buildings, you've got a catch-22 that the mainstream don't even see disability. Literally, they do not meet disabled people because we're not able to actually get to the public places. And it's not only a money thing, but it's a difficult one to resolve when there are elements of finances and economic clout that helps to make certainly the infrastructure of a country more included. And when we were invited out to Japan maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, as like a young leaders program, and we did all sorts of workshops with people from the UK, Denmark, New Zealand, and Japan. And it was looking at the policy of civil society, and we got to go and meet people at care homes and schools for disabled people. And I think the guys from New Zealand, Denmark, and the UK did feel there was a sort of sense of almost a shame of having a disabled child and sort of being segregated more. But as I said, I don't want to totally generalize, and it was just our very quick experience of Tokyo and Hiroshima. But there was a sort of sense that, maybe a different attitude to what I've experienced day to day in the UK anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a different attitude, but I think even in our own countries, whether it's the UK or in Ireland, the cultural attitude has changed over time as well, because I do think there was, and maybe still is, a toxic shame around disability, that we're now a more mature nation, we're losing that, but it's something that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure it still exists in some countries.
Definitely. I mean, I mentioned about parents, and I know there's definitely no shame coming from my mum and dad about me and who I've become and the things I've done. They're very proud. But the reality is, when I was diagnosed with a disability, it was a massive shock. So I think there has to be that support and sort of empowering education for parents when they get that kind of news, and for medical professionals to, you know, to not just deliver the pure medical prognosis, but to signpost and to share positive stories that it isn't. I mean, in some ways, my parents were told that I might not live to adulthood. So there's sometimes a death sentence vibe that is just not really a reality now. Let alone that not just survival, but we can thrive and have a great life. So yeah, all this stuff interplays off each other, and it takes generations to change. But I think we can certainly see a lot of improvement. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm in my mid-30s, and I can track a lot of improvements in that time.
Yeah, I bet you can. Are you involved in accessible tourism as well, and writing blogs about where to go on holidays and where is accessible, etc.?
Yeah, so when I left my job, a big part was I wanted to travel. So it wasn't an aim that I would be sort of doing the traveling for any business pursuit. But I am the first thing I did, actually, I got accepted onto a European Union program called Youth in Action, and it funded people in their 20s to live and work abroad. So I was able to go and live in the northwest of Spain it was about for 3 months, and I ran like an employment clinic, and I taught English to local and they were very much disadvantaged youth groups as well. So it had a very social benefit in this region of Spain. I did hope that I'd have a really warm winter being in Spain, and it turned out this particular part of Spain is really cold and wet in the winter. So I didn't get my kind of warm Spanish sunshine, but I got a very rich cultural experience. Okay. And through blogging about that while I was there, I then started to get invited by tourist boards and travel agencies and press trips to try out other destinations. So yeah, if you check out my blog or my YouTube, there's been a lot of videos and coverage of places I've been to. So that's been a very nice consequence of that, really.
Oh, very good. Can I ask you, if you were in the northwest of Spain, were you in Galicia?
It was next to Galicia. It was Asturias.
I know,
but
Asturias.
It's a very Gallic and Irish influenced culture. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you're not going to have a warm winter in the northwest of Spain.
No,
you have to go down to Andalusia. Yeah, very good. Did you try the cider up there?
Absolutely, yes. That was what kept me warm on the nights out.
Very good. Tell us a little bit about Worldchangers. I know you're on Facebook.
Yeah, so I've always, talked about changing the world from my personal perspective, and I'm very keen to make the point that it's not this big or crass or cheesy thing. It's that, really if we all have something that we see in the world that we don't agree with, and we turn up every day and we speak out and we do something about it, it will change the world. And there's always a ripple effect of what we say and what we do. And I think sometimes people don't speak out or take action because they feel like, what can little old me do and impact? And so the biggest message of Worldchangers is that whatever your passion is and whatever thing you want to improve and change in the world, just do the little things, and actually you'll be surprised where it leads you. And then through that kind of message, I've also got a lot more into coaching. And so in the end, it's become a community of social change leaders that I'm able to kind of impart and share and coach the experiences I've had through the bits we've been speaking about, really. And I would say that the biggest part or thread of the coaching is really how to use digital tools to create digital influence, even if that results in doing things offline as well. It starts with, speaking out on your story and building your own community. And that's been pretty cool how that's built up over the last year. And we've run a few workshops and, get-togethers, all that kind of stuff.
Martyn, how do you have the time to do all these different things? I mean, you're running a business and you're involved in so many things, I suppose, voluntarily in the community.
Yeah, good question, in the sense that it gives me an opportunity to talk about the team, because obviously it's not only me. There's always been that we were never given a shed load of money to go and do something. We've not been a charity. We've not really got a lot of access to any social grants. So we've always had to, do the scrappy startup kind of model. And obviously with Disability Horizons, it's a labour of love and much more of a voluntary thing in terms of the community. But on any of the projects I'm involved in, there's always been a co-founder and a team of volunteers. And then once it's becoming a more sustainable business, we've obviously been able to employ people. But yeah, the biggest answer to your question is that I've surrounded myself with good people. And I think a lesson for me as time's gone on, in the beginning I wanted to do everything and know everything. And I've now got my head around the fact that it's totally fine when I don't know something, and it's fine to know that I'm crap at some stuff. And that's where collaboration and, working together is really important.
Would you advise people with disabilities to go the self-employed route?
I wouldn't want to presume either way. I think it's certainly a very good option for a lot of people. Like for me, when I was doing the job at Scope, it was a good employer and I enjoyed my role. But there were elements of being in an office, particularly midwinter, that I found quite hard, in terms of the health element. So for me, being able to work hours and sort of general times to my own health needs has been really, really good. Obviously, being able to work remotely, such as abroad, is it's a personal preference, but it also has health benefits when I finally did get some winter sun in other places. But yeah, I also think that there's a big trend, not just for disabled people, but this whole kind of big entrepreneurial, it's almost become quite trendy, and it's everyone wants to be the next Zuckerberg or whatever it might be. And actually, there are very amazing, capable people, disabled or not, that can bring their value and their talent to a business as an employee. So I don't think it has to be just be self-employed or just be an entrepreneur. It's more that self-awareness of what works best for us all. And that, yeah, we need leaders, but we also need the warriors and the team that help the leaders to deliver as well.
Yeah, so do you think the future of work might be in that flexible working, that smart working, that remote working model?
Absolutely, yeah. If it has to be a building Monday to Friday 9 to 5, I would start to more say the answer to your original question is, yeah, maybe being self-employed is better for a lot of disabled people. But with the rise of technology, like us chatting on Zoom now and all sorts of other technologies, the fact people can work from home and work different hours from an office, I think is a big enabler in the workforce for disabled people as well.
Can I ask you, Martyn, because we're all talking about Brexit at the moment.
Oh no.
Oh no. How will that impact, people with disabilities in Britain, do you think, or is it on your mind?
I mean, so the first thing about the politics with disability is we saw a massive improvement in getting the Disability Discrimination Act in the UK, and that turned into the Equalities Act. So there's been a good few decades of the civil rights law and then of the general improvements we touched upon earlier. Then we had the whole austerity stuff back in sort of 2009, 2010, and that is still biting. There are small disabled people's organisations and charities that are closing because the funding's just dried up as a result of the cuts. There are people struggling to get access to equipment and wheelchairs and care. So those elements are not great, regardless of Brexit. I think in terms of if Brexit happens, from what I've read up, there are all sorts of horror stories that may happen. But the truth is, we just don't know at the moment. But the big potential reason it's bad is that the European Union have created a lot of powerful laws that will not just protect disabled people, but empower disabled people as consumers and employees. And the worry is, if the UK doesn't follow those sort of legislative or best practice levels and go the other way, then it's a very big risk that it's going to get worse for those two reasons we've now touched upon, both the independent living side being harder, but then the overcoming the barriers to society part being harder as well.
Yeah, because like, I'm heartbroken over Brexit, right? And I think most people in Ireland are. And but I think especially for disabled people, the UK has always been a leader. And you know, a lot of Irish people with disabilities go to the UK even for access. Immigration is what we call it. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on the disability community in Ireland, traveling and getting education, etc. in Britain. But also, I suppose, as you say, the EU as an entity has signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is a leader in terms of accessibility. We have the WCAG 2.1 guidelines for web accessibility and all of that. And the EU is a leader in that. And, you know, the UK was such a huge player in that for disability. So I think it's a conversation that we have to have as people working in the disability sector, and letting the leaders of our countries know, you know, we're not happy. Where is this going to leave us?
Yeah,
we are the biggest minority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the ambiguity is just nobody knows about when Brexit's going to happen. But I think if it does happen one way or another, at the minute it seems like it may well do, then it's the next point is about how the disabled community and in general society really get on the backs of the politicians to demand that the rights and the empowerment of disabled people is still kept in line with the EU standards. But it's not a given if we leave.
It's not a given, but I presume there are plenty local or indigenous, you know, laws, etc., that will keep the standards very high in Britain for disabled people.
I mean, yeah, the Equalities Act would still be there. But as I mentioned, the sort of rights movement has really struggled because of the lack of funding for them. So there's been a lot of the infrastructure of disability rights has been pulled back. And so we're, I think, all trying to evaluate how we keep going in terms of speaking out, but with more innovative and new funding models at the same time.
Absolutely. Before I started recording, Martyn, we were saying about like compartmentalizing work and life and getting that balance. So tell me more. How do I do it? Especially when we're doing something that we love, because it's my passion, all of this accessibility and disability, but you have to compartmentalize it, don't you?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of triangle of areas that, you know, I think when we're in this kind of job, there's more of a looking at how to make the world better. I think we're very cause driven, but then, you know, if you're self-employed or an entrepreneur, you still need the business head, as I mentioned before, kind of new ways of funding all these kind of ventures. And then I think the third pillar, if you like, is self-care. And I know that 3-4 years ago, I definitely suffered a bit of burnout as a result of, you know, constantly being on the go, doing, or even just thinking a lot. You know, I'd be sat up late at night thinking about work as well. And through that bit of burnout, I then realized that, you know, it's good to have time out. It's good to put my phone down of an evening and try to switch off. And then the reality is you're more productive, both because you're not ill if you get ill, but even just, if you're just running on half energy, whereas when you have had that recuperation, you're really more productive and efficient as well. So it's sometimes a bit counterintuitive, but taking time out ends up being more productive in the long run.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think self-care is really important for everyone, but for those of us with disabilities, I know for me, they say stress will make any condition worse. So I'm really aware of my eyesight and maintaining what I have now. So like good nutrition, good sleep, not too much alcohol, and plenty of fresh air and exercise, because if you look after all your body, it'll help with, oxygenating the eyes, etc. So my self-care is quite, I have a ritual. What about you? What do you do to look after yourself?
Assistants come in and I make sure I do some physio. I had a period where I did meditate quite a lot, and I found that I have actually sort of not been doing it as much as I should. And that's exactly that example of, I've not got time to meditate. But then when I did meditate, I actually was a lot better in the long run. So I'm still struggling with this today. It's not like I've got it cracked, right? But yeah, the morning would be kind of, getting up ready and sort of being good for the day ahead, maybe having a bit of a think about my priorities. Whereas if you go rushing straight into your email or straight into your first meeting, you can feel like you're chasing your tail for the rest of the day. But when you've got, I guess we're talking about planning and time management, when you know what the sort of goals are at different levels, you kind of know when you're on course for what you're trying to achieve or not. But again, it sounds easy to say, it's not necessarily easy to do it.
Absolutely. And that's just for everyone as well, for anyone in business or living their lives, having their priorities and planning and knowing what you can and can't do. And whatever stress comes in, you have to give it time to work it out as well, whether it's with exercise or physio or whatever. We have to look after ourselves.
Yeah. And that, maybe it's a bit of an age thing, because most of my 20s, I just didn't worry about what I was eating. I never did physio. I, just sort of burned the candle at all ends and I was fine. And then, as I say, 3-4 years ago, it caught up. And so I'm a bit more cautious of what I eat and, how late nights I'm having. And, it sounds a bit boring, but on the other hand, I enjoy my work and I have a very rich social life in different ways to what I maybe did in my 20s. But it's all good in the end.
Oh, Martyn, chalk it down. What I did in my 20s and what I can do in my 50s is a world apart. Anyway, listen, again, before we started recording, you were telling me some interesting business ventures that you're doing. Do you want to expand a little bit on that for our listeners?
Sure, yeah. So, I guess the last couple of years, I've really come back to, we've got this amazing community on Horizons, and to some degree, it's like a media platform in terms of businesses that have products and services that disabled people would want to buy. There's a good match around sort of advertising, but it's been quite a struggle to get that business model off the ground. And I think it's because when you look at like Facebook advertising and LinkedIn advertising, that there have been cheaper and easier ways from an advertising spend perspective. But as I've come back to Horizon and look at the funding model, there's a massive trend and surge now with influencers. So I'm not talking about disability, I'm talking about marketing campaigns that use influencers on Instagram and YouTube that already have been doing their thing, whatever their thing might be. And it's all about being very niche, very specific with your content, and about really serving and giving to your community. And all of that kind of stuff in a marketing sense is very, very valuable. And these days, if a brand wants to be able to really drill down and reach certain ages or interests, it's actually proving better from an advertising spend perspective doing influencer marketing than it is doing paid for social media ads, particularly because the cost of Facebook ads have gone up a lot as well. So where we're really positioning ourselves now is we're still doing all the community and the media work on Horizons, but we're like a marketing agency to brands, so we can help them understand what disabled consumers want and need, and the culture and the insights, but then and help inform products and services and things like that. But where we're really able to go all out is to then run full-scale marketing campaigns where we utilize Horizons, but we have a network of influencers working with us. So yeah, it's an exciting time using that marketing master's degree I got back in 2006 to bring together all these different parts of my journey to this very powerful way of creating inclusion.
You see, Martyn, you're very interesting because you have a very eclectic background. And as you say, your master's or your educational background, but then your own personal experience of disability, and you're bringing it all together to offer businesses something very unique.
Yeah. And it wasn't by design. It wasn't like 10 years ago. It was like, I'm going to go off there and then I'm going to go there and then I'm going to go there and it's going to end up where it is now. It was all part of that entrepreneurial journey, all the dead ends, all the tough days. Yeah, we're still, of course, going to have challenges and hurdles coming ahead as well. But I think Steve Jobs says that you can only see how the dots join up once you look back, but not when you try to look forward.
That is so true. You know, Martyn, on your LinkedIn, you have lots of things that you are, and then you have Smiler. And what I've noticed since I've started talking to you, you've got a killer smile, but now I'm smiling more as well, just from talking to you on screen.
Yeah, that's not a business strategy, but it's I think it's important to be authentic and to bring who you are to anything. And I've always been happy-go-lucky, and that's definitely part of my brand now as well.
Yeah, and it's a great way to live life, isn't it?
Definitely.
Martyn, I'd say we're coming near the end of our chat. Is there anything
already?
we've left out? I know. What else do we need to cover before we finish up?
No, I think it's been great just to bounce around all the different goings on and the ideas, and I know you've been doing some great stuff in the inclusion space as well. So I think it'd just be great to see all these things coming together that we're both up to, and various other people in the inclusion field. Like I'm sure you're aware of Caroline Casey doing her amazing stuff at Valuable 500, and I'm just excited, looking forward to the opportunities now at our disposal to really get business to take disability seriously and understand that disabled people are voters politically and citizens and consumers, not this sort of passive patients or service users that I think we were once seen as. So it's a lot of work to do, but a lot of tea to drink to power through it. But yeah, a lot of excitement for the future, really.
Yeah, you've made some really good points there, because I suppose the difference now with these digital communities empowering us is we've got some really good leaders in the disability world, and we are taxpayers, we are voters, we are workers, we're mums and dads, we're we're children, we're sisters, we're brothers, we're part of the community, and society's attitude is changing. And with the Valuable 500, I think it's getting business as well to change their attitude to what disability is in 2019, because what disability was even 20 years ago is very different to what it is today.
Absolutely. And I'm sure in another 20 years, it'll be very different as well. I do some consultancy for Open Inclusion, and I help to run their podcast. And I was interviewing a couple of people about the future of transport. And when you think about drones and driverless cars and all this kind of tech, we're at a crossroads where if disabled people are included in the design, then it could be an amazing way of being far more included in transport, which has been a traditionally not very inclusive area for disabled people. But if we're not consulted in the design process, we're going to be even more left out than we've previously been with transport. So I think emerging tech is very interesting one to watch, and it just hope these businesses are awake that it's not a tick box to talk to disabled people so you don't get sued. It's actually business sense, and as you say, we're employers and all sorts of other hats we wear as well.
I think that's the key, public transport is one of my bugbears as well, because I don't drive anymore, and very reliant on public transport. And sometimes I think I live in the Bermuda Triangle rather than Cork, because I have this app which is called Real Time, bus service. And it tells me there's a bus coming in 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, it's coming now, and then it disappears and the bus hasn't come. And I'm like, where am I? And then the next bus, 20 minutes. I'm like, come on, like, can we not have apps that work that really, like, in this day and age, that like if the bus exists, if it doesn't exist, why are you telling me this countdown to a bus that
and that's where there's a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities as well, that like we did with Accommable. We wanted a website that vetted properties to stay in on holiday, so we made it. And then Airbnb realized they should probably be doing that. So that there's a lot of opportunities to create solutions as disabled entrepreneurs. And then in the end, you're going to have that mainstream business that can kind of buy into the idea, but they have to be shown, first of all, what to do.
But well done you for selling to Airbnb.
Yeah, it's pretty, and that's the biggest the biggest sort of signal to the world that there is this real business there.
There sure is, and you'll show the world that, Martyn.
Definitely.
Yeah, come here. Thank you so much for joining me today in rainy Cork, but brightening my evening up with that smile, and for sharing all the information, and always for being so open to share your knowledge with the rest of us in the disabled world. We really appreciate all the work you do, Martyn Sibley.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've really enjoyed chatting, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
All right, thank you. See you later.
Please be advised that this recording does not constitute medical or legal advice.